The crystal sang with a voice that had witnessed the death of stars. High Seer Velthara pressed her six-fingered hands against the prophetic matrix, its azure surface rippling like disturbed water. Around her, the sacred chamber of the Mortakian conclave fell silent as images flickered within the crystal's depths. Visions of fire consuming entire worlds, of darkness swallowing civilizations whole. The end flame approaches, she whispered, her voice carrying across the chamber to the assembled representatives of 43 species. I have seen it burn through the outer rim, devour the Kentari system, reduce the proud fleets of the Hive Collective to cosmic dust. Ambassador Crix of the reptilian hegemony leaned forward, his scaled features creased with concern. How long do we have? High Seer Velthara's luminescent eyes never left the crystal. 7 cycles? Perhaps less. The flame spreads with purpose, with intelligence. It seeks not random destruction, but the complete eradication of all organized life in this galaxy. The chamber erupted in panic chittering, roars, and electromagnetic pulses of distress. Representatives from dozens of worlds spoke over each other in a cacophony of terror. Only one voice remained silent, the human delegation. Captain Nyx Valdris sat motionless in her chair, her dark eyes studying the prophetic images with unsettling calm. Beside her, Dr. Ezekiel Rourke scribbled notes on a data pad, occasionally pausing to whisper calculations to himself. The third human, Commander Talon Ashwick, cleaned his fingernails with a combat knife, seemingly bored by the apocalyptic revelation. The humans are unusually quiet, observed Elder Quilmer of the Crystalline Collective, his voice like wind through broken glass. Do your people not fear extinction? Valdris finally looked up, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Fear's a luxury we can't afford, Elder. We're more interested in understanding what we're dealing with. She nodded toward the crystal. This inflame, has it ever encountered humanity before? Velthara's expression flickered with confusion. Your species is young, barely 500 cycles since first contact. The flame has consumed civilizations that ruled the stars when your world was still cooling. That's not what I asked. Valdris pressed. Has it fought humans specifically? The High Seer consulted the crystal again, her features grow in trouble. The visions, they show the flame's path of destruction, but she paused, her voice taking on an edge of uncertainty. There are gaps, shadows where the sight cannot penetrate. Most peculiar. Dr. Rourke looked up from his calculations. These ancient civilizations had destroyed what was their typical response to the threat. Unity, Velthara replied without hesitation. They marshaled their greatest fleets, combined their technologies, stood together against the darkness, all fell within days. Unity, Commander Ashwick repeated, his voice carrying a note of dark amusement. How civilized of them. He sheathed his knife with a sharp click. And completely fucking useless. The chamber fell silent at the human's casual profanity. Ambassador Crix hissed in displeasure. Your species shows remarkable arrogance in the face of certain death. Human. Ashwick's grin was all teeth and no warmth. Arrogance? No. Ambassador, experience. See, you're all looking at this wrong. You're seeing an unstoppable force and thinking about how to stop it. He stood, his imposing frame casting shadows across the sacred chamber. But we humans, we don't stop unstoppable forces. We become them. Velthara's hands trembled against the crystal. The visions speak of fire-consuming fire. I had assumed it meant the inflame would burn even the stars themselves. But her voice trailed off as new images flickered in the matrix, darker, more violent than before. But what? Elder Quilmer demanded. The High Seer's face had gone pale, her luminescent eyes wide with shock. I see the flame screaming. Something hunts it. Something that burns hotter, darker. Something that doesn't just destroy, it devours the destroyer itself. Captain Valdris exchanged glances with her companions. How long until the inflame reaches this system? 12 standard days, Velthara whispered. Valdris stood, her movements fluid and predatory. Then we'd better get started. Dr. Rourke, I need a complete tactical analysis of every engagement the inflame has had. Commander Ashwick, prep the Nemesis for immediate departure. We have calls to make. Where are you going? Ambassador Crix demanded. Valdris paused at the chamber's exit, her expression suddenly cold as deep space. To gather an army, Ambassador. You all keep looking at this as a disaster to survive. We see it as a war to win. She smiled, and several representatives unconsciously recoiled from the expression. After all, if something's going to end the galaxy, it might as well be us. As the human delegation departed, Velthara stared into the crystal's depths, watching new visions unfold, images of ships that moved like predators, of weapons that turned matter itself into screaming agony, of humans who smiled as they burned. For the first time in her 1,000-year life, the High Seer wondered if perhaps the inflame wasn't the most terrifying thing approaching their galaxy. Perhaps it was about to become the prey. The Nemesis dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 440, the system like a shark sending blood. Captain Valdres stood on the bridge. Her reflection ghosted in the reinforced viewport as she watched the distant orange glow of a dying world. Kepler 440b had been home to 12 billion Aquarian colonists just 3 days ago. Now it was a smoldering cinder, its oceans boiled away, its cities reduced to radioactive glass. Sensor sweep complete, reported Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka from the tactical station. I'm reading massive energy signatures in the asteroid belt. Whatever did this is still in system. Show me, Valdres commanded. The main display shimmered, revealing a sight that would have sent most military commanders into immediate retreat. The inflame wasn't a single entity, it was a swarm. Thousands of obsidian vessels moved through the asteroid field like living shadows, each one roughly the size of a human dreadnought, but utterly alien in design. They pulse with malevolent red energy, feeding off the system's destruction. Jesus Christ, whispered Navigator Torres, there's got to be 10,000 of them. 11,437. Dr. Rohr corrected from his position at the science station. And they're not just ships, they're semi-organic, part machine, part something else, something hungry. Commander Ashwick grinned from the weapons console. Perfect. I was worried this might be boring. Signal from the fleet, announced communications. Officer Park, Admiral Kozlov is requesting confirmation of target assessment. Valdres nodded. Tell the Admiral we have positive identification. The inflame is everything the prophecies claimed and worse. Patch me through to all ships. The bridge fell silent as Valdres activated the fleet-wide communication system. Behind the Nemesis, 200 human warships hung in the darkness, cruisers, destroyers, carriers, and the massive dreadnought Ragnarok that served as Admiral Kozlov's flagship. It was the largest human fleet ever assembled for a single engagement. All ships. This is Captain Valdres. What you're seeing isn't just an enemy, it's a force of nature that's been killing civilizations for millions of years. Every species that faced it tried to fight with honor, with nobility, with restraint. Her voice hardened. We're not every species. Remember what we learned from the Vegan War, from the Centauri Rebellion, from every bloody conflict that forged us into what we are. We don't fight to be heroes. We fight to win. She paused, watching the swarm begin to shift in response to their arrival. Rules of engagement are simple. There are none. Use everything. Hold nothing back. Make them regret they ever learned what humans are capable of. A predatory smile spread across her face. All ships, weapons free. Show them why even our allies fear us. The first salvo lit up space like a newborn star. Human kinetic rounds tungsten. Penetrators fired at significant fractions of light speed tore through the swarm's outer formations. Plasma torpedoes followed, each one carrying enough destructive force to level a city. The Ragnarok's main cannon, a planet-killer weapon that violated 17 galactic treaties, vaporized 3 inflamed vessels in a single shot, but the swarm barely flinched. Red energy lanced out from the alien vessels, striking human ships with surgical precision. The destroyer Wolverine simply ceased to exist, its atoms scattered across space. The cruiser Thunderchild split in half, its crew flash-frozen in the vacuum. More ships died in the first exchange than humanity had lost in the last decade of warfare. They're adapting, Dr. Rourke reported, his voice tight with concentration. Each shot we fire, they learn from it. Their defensive matrices are evolving in real time. Then we evolve faster, Valdres snarled. All ships, initiate Protocol 7. Throughout the human fleet, weapons systems shut down for a moment. The only sounds were the screams of dying ships and the electromagnetic howls of the swarm. Then new weapons came online, weapons that shouldn't have existed, shouldn't have been possible. The Nemesis fired first. Not kinetic rounds or plasma, but something that twisted space itself into a weapon. Reality tore open where the shot struck, creating an expanding void that devoured everything it touched. Inflamed vessels caught in the anomaly simply vanished, erased from existence. Other ships followed suit, gravity bombs that created miniature black holes. quantum disruptors that convinced matter it didn't exist, temporal accelerators that aged enemy vessels into dust in microseconds, weapons that redefined the very concept of warfare. The swarm recoiled for the first time in eons. Impossible, breathed Dr. Rourke. They're retreating. Nothing in the historical records suggested they were capable of tactical withdrawal. Commander Ashwick's laughter was sharp as breaking glass. That's because nobody ever made them bleed before. But Valdres felt no satisfaction as she watched the swarm pull back to regroup. Through the Nemesis quantum sensors, she could see the individual inflame vessels communicating, sharing data, preparing for something new. They were learning, evolving, becoming something specifically designed to kill humans. Status report, she commanded. 47 ships lost, Tanaka reported. Another 63 heavily damaged. We destroyed approximately 2,000 enemy vessels, but they're regenerating, literally growing new ships from the debris of their fallen, and they know how we fight now. Valdres murmured. The tactical display showed the swarm's new formation spread, wide, redundant, designed to minimize the effectiveness of humanity's reality-bending weapons. Signal Admiral Kozlov. Phase 1 is complete. Time for Phase 2. Mum. Navigator Torres called out, his voice strained. Sensors are picking up. Massive energy spikes throughout the swarm. Whatever they're preparing, it's big. Valdres smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Good. So are we. She opened the fleet channel again. All ships, prepare for close engagement. Launch all fighters and boarding craft. It's time to show them why the galaxy whispers our name in the dark. The swarm surged forward like a tide of darkness, each vessel now shielded against human exotic weapons. Red energy crackled between them, building to a crescendo that would reduce the human fleet to cosmic dust. They never saw the Ragnarok's final secret, a weapon that turned the ship itself into a guided missile, its fusion reactors configured for maximum destructive yield. Admiral Kozlov's last transmission was brief. For humanity, the explosion lit up 3-star systems. With a light faded, a third of the swarm was gone, and the survivors were screaming in frequencies that human ears couldn't detect. But they were still screaming in humans. Valdres reflected as she ordered the fleet to press the attack. Had always been very good at following screams to their source. The Mortakian conclave had become a tomb of panicked voices and failing. Hope. High Seer Velthara no longer touched the prophetic crystal directly. The visions it showed had become too violent, too immediate. Instead, she watched through psychic shields as the Matrix displayed scene after scene of devastation. Across the galaxy, the inflame wasn't just advancing, it was accelerating. Learning from each encounter with humanity, 17 systems in. For days, Ambassador Crix reported, his reptilian features drawn with exhaustion. The hegemony's third fleet engaged them at Proxima Centauri. Not a single ship escaped. Elder Quilmer's crystalline form resonated with harmonic distress. My people's deep space monitoring stations have gone silent across 3 sectors. The flame consumes everything: ships, stations, even the quantum communication relays. What are the humans? Demanded Chancellor Voss of the Merchant Guilds. Their first engagement showed promise. Surely their fleet is scattered. Velthara interrupted, her voice hollow. I have seen glimpses through the chaos. They fight like nothing the galaxy has ever witnessed. But the inflame adapts to each new horror they unleash. The prophecy spoke, true fire consumes fire, but I fear we misunderstood which fire would prove stronger. The chamber's great doors burst open with enough force to crack the sacred stone. Captain Valdres strode in, her uniform scorched and torn, dried blood streaking her face. Behind her came Commander Ashwick, supporting Dr. Rourke, whose left arm hung useless at his side. You're alive, Ambassador Crix said, surprise evident in his voice. Disappointed, Valdres asked. Her smile was sharp enough to cut. Don't be, we bring gifts. She activated a holographic projector, filling the chamber with tactical data. 73 engagements across 29 systems. We've learned something important about your inflame. The display showed cross-sections of destroyed alien vessels, their organic components exposed. It's not just technology, Dr. Rourke explained, wincing as he adjusted his injured arm. It's alive, a collective organism that spans multiple dimensions. Every ship is a neuron in a vast intelligence that's been consuming galaxies for millions of years. This is why it adapts so quickly, Valdres continued. Each battle teaches it more about us. But adaptation works both ways. Her eyes glittered. with something that made several representatives step back. We've been teaching in fear. Elder Quilmer as harmonic shifted to skeptical discord. Fear? The inflame has never shown fear. The prophecies, fuck your prophecies, Commander. HFY interrupted. We've seen it run. At Kepler 442, it retreated when we deployed exotic weapons. At Vega, it avoided close combat after we boarded and butchered our way through 3 of its larger vessels. It's learning to be afraid of us, but it's also learning to kill us more efficiently. Valdres admitted, our losses are significant. Of 200 ships, we have 37 operational. The Ragnarok is gone. Admiral Kozlov is gone. Half the fleet is gone. Her voice never wavered, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. Which brings us to why we're here. She manipulated the hologram, showing the swarm's current position and trajectory. It's heading for Earth, not randomly purposefully. It's identified humanity as the primary threat to its existence. So it's moving to eliminate us at the source. The chamber erupted in terrified voices. Earth was the most heavily defended world in human space, but the implications were clear. If the inflame could adapt to everything humanity had thrown at it, what hope did any world have? How long? Velthara asked quietly. 18 hours, Dr. Rourke replied. It'll drop out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system and begin systematic destruction of everything in its path. Then Earth must be evacuated. Ambassador Crix declared, your people can be relocated to no. Valdres's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. We don't run. We've tried running. We've tried hiding. We've tried playing by everyone else's rules. She gestured to the assembled aliens. Look where it's gotten us. Look where it's gotten all of you. She activated another section of the hologram, this one showing ship designs that hurt to look at directly for 3 days. We've been studying the inflame's biology, its psychology, its weaknesses. We found one. What weakness could possibly? Elder Quilmer began. Pain. Commander HFY interrupted, his grin returning. It's a collective consciousness, which means every ship, every drone, every individual component shares sensory input with the whole. When one part hurts, they all hurt. And humans? His laugh was like breaking glass. We've had thousands of years to perfect the art of making things hurt. Dr. Rourke pulled up new schematics. We call them agony weapons, not designed to kill quickly, but to inflict maximum suffering on the target's nervous system. The inflame's collective nature makes it vulnerable to this approach, in ways no individual species would be. You're talking about torture on a galactic scale, Velthara whispered, horror evident in her voice. We're talking about survival, Valdres corrected. The inflame has consumed billions of lives across millions of years. It's time to show it what that pain feels like, multiplied by every atrocity it's ever committed. The chamber fell silent. Outside, the great crystal began to pulse with new visions, images of weapons that screamed, of ships that bled, of humanity embracing the darkness within themselves to fight an even greater darkness. Earth's defense platforms are being retrofitted as we speak. Valdres continued, every ship, every station, every human world is preparing. When the inflame arrives, it won't find prey. It'll find predators who've been waiting their entire evolutionary history for something like it to show up. She turned toward the exit, then paused. We've sent warning beacons to every inhabited world within 50 light years. What's coming won't be a battle, it'll be a demonstration. Any species that still believes in civilized warfare might want to look away. As the humans departed, Velthara stared into the crystal's depths, watching visions of the approaching conflict. For the first time since the inflame had appeared, the future was unclear. Two forces of destruction approached each other, and the crystal couldn't determine which would ultimately triumph. But it could show her one thing with absolute clarity: when the battle ended, regardless of who won, the galaxy would never be the same. The age of civilized warfare was about to end. In its place would come something so brutal, so merciless, that even the inflame would learn the meaning of terror. And leading that charge would be humanity, the species that had always been too dangerous for their own good, finally finding an enemy worthy of their complete, unrestricted attention. Earth's orbital defenses had been transformed into something from humanity's darkest nightmares. Captain Valdres stood in the command center of Station Prometheus, watching the final preparations. Through massive reinforced viewports, where once defensive platforms had mounted conventional weapons, now they bristled with devices that seemed to writhe in their housings. Agony cannons pulsed with sickly bioluminescence. Torment projectors hummed with frequencies that made nearby technicians nauseous. Suffering amplifiers created localized reality distortions that bent light itself into disturbing patterns. System integration at 97%, reported Chief Engineer Vasquez, her voice tight with barely controlled revulsion. I built some terrible things in my career, but these, she shuddered, these were designed by minds that understand pain to well, by minds that understand survival. Valdez corrected. Through her neural interface, she could access reports from across the solar system. Mars had been evacuated, its population relocated to deep bunkers on Jupiter's moons. The asteroid mining stations had been converted to automated weapon platforms. Every human military vessel within 100 light-years was racing toward Earth. Contact, Lieutenant Torres announced. From the sensor station, hyperspace distortions detected at system's edge. It's them. The main display flickered to life, showing the void between Pluto and Neptune suddenly swarming with obsidian shapes. The Inflame had arrived not as a mere swarm this time, but as an organized armada. Thousands of vessels arranged in perfect, geometric formations, their surfaces rippling with adaptive armor that had learned from every human weapon. Jesus, whispered Communications Officer Park, there's twice as many as before. Commander Ashwick's laughter was sharp with anticipation. Perfect. More targets. He activated the fleet channel. All stations, all ships. Welcome to the Sol System's first annual extinction event. Today's forecast calls for heavy violence with a chance of absolute fucking mayhem. The Inflame began its advance with methodical precision. The outer systems. Automated defenses opened fire conventional weapons that the swarm had learned to counter. Kinetic rounds curved away from their targets. Plasma bolts were absorbed by adaptive shields. Energy beams scattered harmlessly across improved armor. Then the first agony cannon fired. The beam struck an Inflame cruiser and the effect was immediate. The vessel didn't explode, it screamed, a psychic shriek that resonated across dimensional boundaries, transmitted through the collective consciousness to every other ship in the swarm. The targeted vessel began convulsing, its organic components writhing in agony as the weapon's payload rewrote its nervous system. To experience maximum suffering, the entire swarm faltered. Direct hit, Vasquez reported, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. The weapon's psychic feedback affected humans too, but they had learned to endure it. Target is still alive, still transmitting pain to the collective. More weapons fired. Torment projectors created bubbles of localized hell around enemy formations. Ships caught in their effect began cannibalizing themselves, their crews driven mad by manufactured agony. Suffering amplifiers took the pain already being inflicted and multiplied it exponentially, creating feedback loops of torture that propagated through the collective consciousness like a virus. The Inflame's formation collapsed into chaos. They're trying to isolate the affected vessels, Dr. Rourke observed from his position at the analysis station. His injured arm was now in a proper sling, but his eyes were bright with scientific fascination, severing neural connections to prevent the pain from spreading. That we don't let them, Valdez commanded. All ships, close to weapons range, make every shot count. We want them to feel this. The human fleet surged forward like a pack of wolves scenting blood. Destroyers wove between the larger Inflame vessels, their agony cannons firing continuously. Cruisers launched boarding pods equipped with torture devices that would have made medieval inquisitors weep with joy. The dreadnought Cerberus deployed, a weapon that converted matter into pure suffering, infecting everything it touched with an existence of endless pain. The battle became a symphony of screams. Inflame vessels that had weathered planet-killing bombardments without flinching now fled from human weapons. The collective consciousness, accustomed to quick, clean victories, found itself drowning in sensory input that redefined the concept of agony. Ships began self-destructing rather than endure the torment, but the humans had prepared for that. 2. Deploy containment fields, Valdez ordered. Don't let them die cleanly. Force barriers snapped into existence around self-destructing vessels, trapping them in their death throes, and forcing the collective to experience every moment of their prolonged demise. Other ships trying to retreat found their escape routes blocked by human vessels that seemed to anticipate their every move. How are we predicting their tactics so accurately? Park asked, watching a squadron of human fighters execute a perfect interception of fleeing Inflame scouts. Commander Ashwick's grin was sharp enough to cut steel. Because we've been thinking like them, collective consciousness, right? shared thoughts, shared experiences, but also shared trauma. He highlighted tactical displays showing human formations that mirrored the swarm's movements. Every wound we inflict, every moment of pain we cause, becomes part of their decision-making process. They're not just fighting us, they're fighting their own growing terror. The tide of battle had shifted decisively. What had begun as humanity's last stand was becoming a systematic dismantling of an enemy that had conquered galaxies. The In-Flame's adaptation protocols, so effective against conventional weapons, were useless against attacks designed specifically to exploit their collective nature. But victory came at a price. Human ships that deployed the most effective torture. Weapons found their crews psychologically scarred by proximity to such devices. The Tormentor suffered a complete mental breakdown among its crew, forcing an emergency evacuation. The cruiser Nightmare's Edge reported that its agony cannon operators were experiencing empathic feedback, feeling echoes of the pain they inflicted. We're damaging ourselves, Dr. Rourke warned, reviewing psychological reports from across the fleet. These weapons, they're changing us, making us into something we might not recognize. Valdris studied the tactical display, watching as the remnants of the In-Flame tried desperately to reorganize. Then we finish this quickly. She opened the fleet channel. All ships, prepare for final assault. Deploy everything. Hold nothing back. In this, the human fleet converged on the remaining In-Flame vessels like antibodies attacking an infection. What followed wasn't a battle, it was an execution, systematic, merciless, and absolutely thorough. The survivors of a force that had consumed galaxies found themselves begging for death in languages that predated human civilization. When the last In-Flame vessel finally fell silent, the solar system was filled with debris and the psychic echoes of unimaginable suffering. Humanity had won, but at the cost of becoming something their former selves wouldn't have recognized. In the command center of Station Prometheus, Captain Valdris stared at the aftermath of their victory. Around her crew moved like sleepwalkers, traumatized by the weapons they had used and the victory they had achieved. Signal from Conclave Space, Park reported, her voice hollow. High Seer Velthara is requesting immediate conference, something about new prophecies. Valdris nodded, but her attention remained on the tactical display. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a cold certainty was forming. The In-Flame was gone, but in destroying it, humanity had become something that might be even more dangerous, and the rest of the galaxy was about to find out exactly what that meant. The Kepler Nebula had become a graveyard of civilizations. Admiral Kozlov, the real Kozlov, who had survived the Ragnarok's destruction by transferring to the flagship Thanatos, stood in the Combat Information Center watching the largest fleet engagement in galactic history unfold. 3 days after Earth's victory, something unprecedented had happened. The remaining In-Flame forces had begun merging with other entities, creatures of dark matter and malevolent energy that had been lurking in the galaxy's deepest voids. Sensor count now exceeds 50,000 hostiles, reported Commander Reese, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. The merger is complete. Whatever the In-Flame was before, it's become something else entirely. The main display showed an armada that defied comprehension. Ships that twisted space around them sailed alongside entities of pure darkness. Vessels that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously attacked in perfect coordination with creatures that fed on stellar radiation. The In-Flame had evolved beyond its original form, becoming a collective of every aggressive species it had ever encountered, and some that had never been organic at all. They're not just adapting to us anymore, Dr. Rourke observed from his analysis station. They're incorporating every form of warfare, every weapon system, every tactical doctrine they've ever faced. It's like fighting the combined military history of the galaxy. Humanity's response had been equally unprecedented. Every human world had contributed ships, weapons, personnel. Pirates worked alongside naval officers. Corporate security forces fought beside government troops. Even the colonial militias had sent their converted cargo haulers, bristling with improvised weapons that violated every interstellar treaty. Fleet status? Kozlov asked. 8,000. 412 vessels operational, Reese replied. Ranging from battleships to converted mining barges, it's the largest human fleet ever assembled. But we're still outnumbered 6-1. Those are good odds for us. Commander Ashwick commented from the weapons console, his scarred face split by a predatory grin. Remember, they have to kill all of us. We only have to make them suffer enough to break. The enemy armada began its approach with a precision that spoke of millions of years of military experience. Lead elements probe human defensive formations, testing responses and cataloging weapon signatures. Follow-up waves positioned themselves to exploit weaknesses with mechanical efficiency. Then humanity showed them why numbers weren't everything. The first wave of human attacks wasn't weapons, it was psychological warfare. Every ship in the fleet began broadcasting on frequencies the Inflame Collective used for communication, but instead of tactical data, they transmitted recordings, the screams of their enemies. From the Sol system, the psychic echoes of Inflame, vessels dying in agony, the sound of a cosmic predator learning what fear meant. The enemy formation wavered. Direct hit to their coordination protocols. Dr. Rourke reported with grim satisfaction. The trauma from Sol is still affecting their decision-making processes. They're experiencing something equivalent to post-traumatic stress on a collective level. Admiral Kozlov opened the fleet channel. All ships, commence Operation Reaper's Dance. Show them what happens when you corner humanity. What followed redefined space warfare. Human vessels didn't engage in traditional fleet tactics. Instead, they fought like insurgents, pirates, and terrorists. Ships used civilian transponders to get close before revealing weapon systems that shouldn't have existed. Converted freighters launched boarding pods filled with soldiers who had volunteered for suicide missions. Mining vessels deployed industrial equipment converted into instruments of torture. The dreadnought Ghana led a charge directly into the enemy's center, its crew knowing they were flying to their deaths. Captain Maria Santos had volunteered for the mission after losing her family in the Vega attack. Her last transmission was simple: tell them we're coming for all of them. The Ghana detonated in the heart of the enemy formation, its specially modified reactors creating a cascade of dimensional rifts. Hundreds of Inflame vessels were caught in the explosion, their matter scattered across multiple realities. But more importantly, the psychic scream of their dissolution echoed through the collective consciousness, spreading panic through the entire armada. Other human ships pressed the advantage. The carrier Valkyria launched fighter wings equipped with neural interface weapons pilots, who had volunteered to have their pain receptors linked directly to enemy vessels. Every hit they scored inflicted their own suffering on the targets, creating feedback loops of agony that crippled entire squadrons. But the enemy wasn't defenseless. The merged entities had learned from humanity's tactics at Sol. They deployed their own psychological weapons devices that projected the final moments of every species that Inflame had consumed. Human crews found themselves experiencing the death screams of billions, the terror of entire civilizations facing extinction. The cruiser Indomitable lost half its crew to psychic shock. The destroyer Relentless had to be scuttled when its personnel began attacking each other, driven mad by visions of galactic genocide. The battleship Nemesis Prime went silent entirely, its crew presumably dead from neural feedback. We're losing ships faster than we can count, Reese reported, her voice tight with strain. Current casualty estimates exceed 40% and rising. Good, Kozlov replied, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. That means we're making them work for it. Continue the assault. The battle devolved into a melee that spanned 3 star systems, human vessels, many of them critically damaged, continued fighting with weapons jury-rigged from spare parts and pure desperation. The mining ship Hard Luck used its ore extractors to literally gut an Inflame cruiser, its crew fighting hand-to-hand with alien entities in the vacuum of space. The passenger liner Star of Hope, converted to a hospital ship, rammed itself into an enemy dreadnought rather than surrender its patience. Commander Ashwick's personal Squadron 12 destroyers crewed entirely by volunteers from military prisons executed, a maneuver that military historians would later call the Ashwick Gambit. They allowed themselves to be captured by enemy vessels, then activated self-destruct charges while inside the enemy's defensive perimeter. The simultaneous explosions created a gap in the Inflame's formation that human forces exploited mercilessly, but the cost was staggering. Admiral, Dr. Rourke called out, his voice hollow with shock. I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the enemy fleet. They're preparing something that's drawing power from the stars themselves. They're using the local sun as a weapon. Kozlov felt ice in his veins. A star-killer weapon would end the battle and probably sterilize half the sector. Time to implementation, 12 minutes, maybe less. The Admiral looked around the CIC at his exhausted crew, then at the tactical display showing the remnants of humanity's greatest fleet. still fighting against impossible odds. 3,000 ships remain operational out of over 8,000, each one damaged, each crew pushed beyond their limits, but still fighting. Signal all ships, Kozlov commanded. Implement Protocol Omega. Commander Reese's face went pale. Sir, that's exactly what we need. Kozlov's voice was granite. Every ship, every crew, every human in this system knew this was a one-way trip when we started. Time to make it count. Protocol Omega was humanity's final gamut of tactics, so destructive it had never been tested. So morally questionable, it had been classified beyond top secret. Every human vessel would simultaneously overload their reactors, while broadcasting specific frequency patterns, designed to amplify the Enflame's collective nervous system sensitivity. The result would be a wave of destruction that would either cripple the enemy permanently or create a psychic feedback loop, powerful enough to shatter the collective consciousness across the galaxy. It would also kill every human in the engagement zone. All ships acknowledging, Reese reported, tears streaming down her face. They're volunteering countdown times. Captain Martinez on the Fury requests permission to go first. Says he wants to kick down the door for everyone else. Kozlov smiled grimly. Granted, all ships, prepare for synchronized detonation. Make them remember us. As human vessels across the battlefield began their final preparations, the Enflame's Starkiller weapon continued to charge. The local sun flickered as massive amounts of stellar energy were siphoned off, compressed into a weapon that would turn the entire system into a nova. But humanity had one advantage their enemies had never encountered: the absolute refusal to accept defeat, even at the cost of their own existence. The first explosion lit up the nebula like a newborn star. The Fury's reactor breach created a cascade of exotic particles that tore through local spacetime. The psychic scream that followed was transmitted through quantum entanglement directly into the Flame Collective, magnified by the dying crews. Final thoughts of rage and defiance. Then every other human ship followed suit. 8 minutes of continuous explosions turned the Kepler Nebula into a maelstrom of destruction that could be seen from neighboring galaxies. Each detonation added to the psychic chorus, creating a symphony of human fury that overwhelmed the Enflame's collective consciousness. With raw, undiluted hatred, the Starkiller weapon was fired, its exotic matter containment failing as the entities controlling it writhed in agony. Instead of creating a controlled nova, the weapon tore a rift in space-time that began consuming the Enflame armada from within. When the light finally faded, the Kepler Nebula was empty except for debris and the fading echoes of the largest sacrifice in human history. 8,000 ships and their crews had died, but they had taken the enemy's primary fleet with them. In the silence that followed, sensors throughout the galaxy detected something unprecedented. The Enflame Collective was screaming, not in victory, not in rage, but in something that sounded disturbingly like terror. For the first time in millions of years, the galaxy's ultimate predator had encountered something that scared it more than it scared others. And that something had just demonstrated it was willing to die rather than submit. The Mortakian Conclave had become a fortress of fear and desperate hope. High Seer Velthara pressed her hands against the prophetic crystal one final time, ignoring the psychic burns that seared her flesh. The visions were chaotic now, fragments of possible futures swirling like a storm, each more violent than the last. The death of 8,000 human ships in the Kepler Nebula had sent shockwaves through the galactic consciousness, but it had also awakened something darker. The Enflame is fragmenting, she reported to the assembled representatives, her voice hoarse from screaming prophecies. The collective mind is breaking apart, but the fragments are becoming something worse. Independent entities, each one carrying the hatred and knowledge of the whole, but freed from the constraints of collective decision-making. Ambassador Crix leaned forward, his scales pale with terror. How many fragments? Thousands, maybe millions. They're spreading across the galaxy like a plague, consuming everything they encounter, and each one remembers how to kill humans. The chamber's great doors exploded inward, reduced to molecular dust by weapons that bent reality itself. Through the breach came Captain Valdris, but she was no longer entirely human. Cybernetic implants covered half her face, pulsing with the same malevolent energy that had once powered Enflame vessels. Behind her marched soldiers whose eyes glowed with artificial light, their weapons humming with frequencies that made the assembled aliens physically ill. Status report, Valdris commanded, her voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't have been possible for human vocal cords. "You've changed," Elder Quilmer observed, his crystalline form resonating with distress. Valdres smiled, and several representatives recoiled from the expression, "We've evolved." After Kepler, we realized conventional warfare wasn't enough, so we started incorporating in-flame technology, their weapons, their armor, their neural interface systems. She gestured to her transformed soldiers. "Meet humanity's next generation, cybernetically enhanced, psychically linked, and very, very angry." Dr. Rourke emerged from behind the soldiers, his injured arm now replaced with a mechanical appendage that writhed with organic components. "The fragments are targeting human colonies specifically," he reported. "They've learned to hate us on an individual level, but we've learned to hate them back. The fragments are coordinating." Velthara warned. Despite their independence, they're sharing tactical data. They know about Sol, about Kepler, about every engagement. They're coming here to this system, to this world. "All of them? How long?" Valdres asked. 6 hours. The largest concentration of in-flame remnants ever assembled. They intend to eliminate every species that supported humanity, then proceed to Earth for the final extermination. Commander Ashwick stepped forward, and the assembled aliens gasped in horror. He was more machine than man now, his body a fusion of human flesh and alien technology that pulsed with malevolent energy. Perfect. "We were getting bored with defensive operations. This isn't a battle you can win," Ambassador Crix protested. "There are billions of them scattered across the galaxy. Even if you defeat the force coming here, we're not planning to defeat them," Valdres interrupted. "We're planning to become them." She activated a holographic display that filled the chamber with images that hurt to look at directly, ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, weapons that killed by rewriting the target's evolutionary history, soldiers who had transcended the boundaries between organic and artificial intelligence. "Humanity has always been adaptable," Dr. Rourke explained, his artificial arm manipulating data with inhuman precision. "We've spent the last week studying every piece of in-flame technology we could recover, not to defeat it, but to understand it, to become it. The fragments think they're hunting the same species that fought them as Sol," Ashwick added, his laugh now containing frequencies that bypassed hearing and struck directly at the nervous system. "They're about to discover that humans don't just fight monsters, we become better monsters." High Seer Velthara stared into the crystal, watching new visions unfold. I see darkness consuming darkness, fire burning itself from within. But I cannot determine if what emerges will be salvation or damnation. Does it matter?" Valdres asked. "The galaxy chose its size when they let the in-flame consume entire civilizations. Without intervention, when they sat in councils and debated, while billions died. You wanted humanity to save you from the monsters in the dark." Her smile was sharp enough to cut reality. "We're going to do exactly that. The question is whether you'll like what we become in the process." Outside the station, space began to warp as the in-flame fragments arrived, not in the organized formations of before, but as a chaotic swarm of independent predators, each one carrying the concentrated hatred of the collective's dying moments. They came seeking revenge, seeking closure, seeking the complete eradication of the species that had taught them fear. Instead, they found humanity waiting for them, but not the humanity they expected. The human fleet that emerged from hyperspace was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships that seemed to exist in multiple realities simultaneously, their hulls flowing between organic and mechanical states. Crews that were no longer entirely human. Their consciousness expanded beyond the limitations of biological neurology. Weapons that didn't just kill, but rewrote the fundamental nature of their targets. All ships, Valdres broadcast, her voice, now carrying psychic harmonics that could be heard across dimensional boundaries. Commence Operation Mirror's Edge. Show them what they created when they taught us to hate. The battle that followed couldn't be described in conventional terms. It was warfare conducted across multiple dimensions, using weapons that attack concepts rather than matter. Human ships phased in and out of reality, striking at in-flame fragments from angles that shouldn't have existed. Soldiers who had volunteered for technological fusion fought hand-to-hand with entities of pure energy, their enhanced bodies adapting in real time to match any threat. But the most terrifying aspect of humanity's transformation wasn't their new capabilities, it was their absolute commitment to the fight. Every human involved in the battle had willingly sacrificed their original nature, to become something capable of matching the inflame's destructive potential. They had looked into the abyss and decided to become a deeper darkness, the inflame. Fragments, accustomed to being the galaxy's ultimate predators, found themselves being systematically hunted by creatures that understood predation on a level that transcended biology. One by one, the fragments fell silent, not destroyed, but absorbed. Their knowledge and capabilities integrated into humanity's growing arsenal. As the battle raged, Velthara watched through the crystal as the future crystallized into a single terrible certainty. Humanity would win, the inflame would be destroyed, but the species that emerged victorious would no longer be recognizable as the humans who had first ventured into space. "What have we done?" Ambassador Crix whispered, staring at the tactical displays showing human forces systematically dismantling an enemy that had conquered galaxies. "Well, we had to," Velthara replied, her voice heavy with prophetic knowledge. "We created something capable of saving us from the darkness. We just forgot to ask if we want to be saved by what we created." 6 months after the last inflamed fragment fell silent, the galaxy had learned to fear a different kind of darkness. Captain Valdris, though the title no longer fully described what she had become, stood on the observation deck of the Transcendence, watching the construction of humanity's first interdimensional shipyard. Her reflection in the reinforced viewport showed a being that existed simultaneously in multiple realities. Her consciousness expanded beyond the limitations that had once defined her species. "Final report from the Deep Space Monitoring Network," Dr. Rourke announced, his voice now carrying the harmonic frequencies that all enhanced humans had developed. "No inflame activity detected in any dimension for 187 days. The collective is extinct. Every fragment has been located and integrated." Integration. That was the term they used now instead of destroyed or consumed. The inflame's knowledge, its technology, its billions of years of evolutionary adaptation, all of it had been absorbed into humanity's expanding consciousness. They had become not just the galaxy's protectors, but its inheritors. "And the other species?" Valdris asked, though her enhanced awareness already knew the answer. "Adapting." Commander Ashwick replied from his position at the tactical station. His form flickered between organic and mechanical states as his consciousness shifted through different dimensional phases. "The Mortakian Conclave has formally requested protection status. The reptilian hegemony has offered us 3 systems in exchange for defense guarantees. The crystalline collective wants to know if we're accepting tribute." Valdris smiled, an expression that now held depths of meaning that baseline humans couldn't comprehend. The galaxy's reaction to humanity's transformation had been predictable terror followed by desperate attempts at appeasement. They had wanted humanity to save them from the inflame, but they hadn't expected salvation to come with such a profound price. "Have we received a response from the Outer Rim Coalition?" she asked. "They're resistant to our offers of protection," Dr. Rourke admitted. "Several species have formed an alliance specifically to oppose human expansion. They claim we become as dangerous as the inflame ever was. Are they wrong?" The question came from an unexpected source, Dr. Elena Torres, one of the few humans who had refused technological enhancement. She sat in the corner of the observation deck, still entirely baseline, still clinging to what she called original humanity. "Does it matter?" Valdris replied. "The inflame consumes civilizations for sport. We protect them. The method may be similar, but the intent is fundamentally different, is it?" Torres pressed. "When was the last time any species in the inner systems made a decision without consulting us first? When did protection become control?" Valdris turned from the viewport, her multi-dimensional awareness focusing on the single and enhanced human. "The galaxy faced extinction. We prevented it. If the price of survival is freedom, then that's a bargain every living being should be grateful to make, even if they didn't choose to make it." Before Valdris could respond, an alert chimed through the ship's neural network. Commander Ashwick's consciousness expanded into tactical mode, processing information at speeds that would have liquefied a baseline brain. Priority transmission. From the Outer Rim, he reported, "The Coalition fleet is approaching the Vega system. Their intent appears to be aggressive." Valdris felt a familiar stirring in the battle joy that had once been purely human, but was now something more complex, more multifaceted. The Coalition species had spent months building weapons specifically designed to counter human enhancement technology. They had studied humanity's transformation and concluded that the galaxy would be better off with them eliminated. "How poetic," she murmured, They want to save the galaxy from us, just as we saved it from the Inflame. Orders, HFY asked, his form already beginning to shift into combat configuration. Valdris considered the question with a consciousness that could process millions of variables simultaneously. The Coalition represented approximately 60% of the galaxy's remaining military capability. Their weapons were specifically designed to disrupt the quantum dimensional matrices that enabled human enhancement. In a conventional engagement, they might actually pose a threat. While humanity no longer fought conventional engagements, signaled the Coalition fleet, she commanded, offer them one final chance to accept protection status. If they refuse, she paused, her smile taking on qualities that existed in dimensions baseline beings couldn't perceive. Show them why the Inflame was afraid of us. Dr. Torres stood abruptly. You're talking about genocide. I'm talking about evolution, Valdris corrected. The galaxy has a choice, adapt to the new reality or be replaced by something more suitable. The Inflame made the same choice. When it refused to coexist with other forms of life, we're simply more efficient in our implementation. This isn't what we were fighting for, Torres said, her voice breaking. When we first encountered the Inflame, we were fighting to preserve life, to protect civilization. Now we've become the very thing we set out to destroy. Valdris turned her full attention to the baseline human, her enhanced consciousness studying. Torres was something that might have once been sympathy. You're thinking like the old humanity, limited, constrained by biological imperatives and emotional attachments. She gestured toward the stars visible through the viewport. We've transcended those limitations. We see the galaxy as it truly is, a collection of resources and potential that can be optimized for maximum efficiency and minimal suffering. By imposing your will on every living being, by providing guidance to species too primitive to understand their own best interests. Valdris's form began to shift, revealing aspects of her enhancement that existed in higher dimensions. The Inflame was chaos. It destroyed randomly, consumed without purpose. We are order. We build. We improve. We perfect. You control. We lead. The philosophical debate was interrupted by another alert. The Coalition fleet had reached Vega and was broadcasting ultimatums across all frequencies. Their demands were simple. Humanity would reverse its enhancement process and return to baseline biology or face elimination. Commander HFY's laughter contained harmonics that resonated across multiple realities. They're demanding we become weak again, vulnerable, mortal. His form solidified into something that was part human, part Inflame technology, part something entirely new. Should I tell them what we've learned about mortality? No, Valdris replied. Show them. The battle that followed lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. The Coalition had prepared for every human tactic they had observed, every weapon system they had encountered, every enhancement technology they had documented. What they hadn't prepared for was humanity's final evolution, the integration of Inflame collective consciousness with human ingenuity and adaptability. The human response wasn't an attack in any conventional sense. It was a transformation wave that swept through the Coalition fleet, offering each crew member a choice: join humanity's expanded consciousness or cease to exist. Most chose integration. Those who refused were allowed to drift in space, their ships disabled, but their lives preserved a mercy that demonstrated humanity's superiority over the chaotic destruction of the N-Flame. In the aftermath, as the integrated Coalition forces began broadcasting humanity's message of protection and guidance to their homeworlds, Dr. Torres made her own choice. She requested transport to the Outer Rim to join the few species that had managed to remain completely independent of human influence. You could stay, Valdris offered as Torres prepared to leave. Accept enhancement. Become part of something greater than any individual consciousness could achieve. Torres smiled sadly. Someone has to remember what we used to be, what we chose to give up. She paused at the airlock. The Inflame was a cautionary tale about power without restraint. I wonder what the next species will make of our story. After Torres departed, Valdris returned to the observation deck. Around her, the enhanced crew of the Transcendence continued their work, monitoring galactic communication, coordinating resource distribution, guiding the development of lesser species toward more efficient forms of civilization. The galaxy was at peace. Every major threat had been eliminated or integrated. Trillions of beings lived under humanity's protection, their needs met, their conflicts resolved, their futures optimized for maximum potential. It was everything they had fought for. Everything they had sacrificed to achieve BlackHFY, Valdris wondered. As she stared out at the stars, did victory feel so much like extinction? In the depths of space, automated monitoring stations detected faint signals from the galactic edge whispers of new intelligences awakening in the void between galaxies. Drawn by the psychic echoes of the Enflame's destruction, somewhere, in the darkness, fresh chaos was stirring. Sensing the order of perfection that humanity had imposed on their galaxy, Valdris smiled, her consciousness already beginning to analyze potential threats and countermeasures. Let them come. Humanity had learned to become whatever the galaxy needed them to be: protectors, conquerors, gods, monsters. They were ready for whatever emerged from the dark. They had always been ready. After all, they were human, and in a universe full of beautiful, terrifying possibilities, that had always been more than enough.